I'm at my limit. Mike, I'm sorry to say this, but I'm going to demand compensation from Sarah.
Compensation? What happened?
I've been harassed by her for so long. I want an apology for all of it. That night, while Sarah was in the bath, I confided in Mike. Mike was surprised, and though he seemed to think it was a joke at first, he just gave a bitter laugh.
Mom, that's not funny. Are you serious?
Surely, it was a shock for Mike. Of course, I'm serious. Look at this. The notebook I handed him was about to set off a series of tumultuous events. My name is Ellie. I'm 60 years old. I live alone now, just a plain old lady. I got married in my 20s and had my son, Mike. While Mike was still young, my husband fell ill. He was hospitalized and focused on his treatment, but despite that, he passed away. Since then, I've been raising Mike by myself. We didn't have any relatives to rely on, and juggling work and child care alone was tough. I might have made Mike feel lonely. But Mike grew up to be a very serious and good boy. Even without me, he was diligent in his studies and went to college. He even applied for a scholarship by himself for the entrance fee, which really surprised me. After graduating, he got a job at a local trading company and moved out. I often think he's more put together than I am, trying not to bother me. So, with Mike grown up, I've been living a worry-free life in my later years. As I was leisurely drinking tea, the phone suddenly rang. It was Mike.
Mom, I'm bringing over my fiancé soon.
A sudden marriage announcement. But come to think of it, Mike is already in his mid-30s. It wouldn't be strange if he were already married. A few days after the call, I met Mike's girlfriend, Sarah, for the first time. She was in her 20s and still young, and I couldn't hide my surprise. How did she meet Mike, who was much older than her? How did you two meet?
Oh, we met at a mixer. A colleague from work set it up, and Mike was invited to fill the numbers.
Apparently, they ended up sitting next to each other, and though Mike only talked about work, they hit it off. Sarah worked at a store that dealt with imported goods, so they found common ground in the hardships of managing inventory. They promised to meet again over drinks to vent about work, and exchanged contact details. From there, their relationship quickly developed. After hearing the story of how they met, Mike went to the restroom. In the living room, it was just Sarah and me, and silence fell. At times like this, I didn't know what to say, and as I floundered, Sarah spoke up.
Did Mike live in this house until he got a job?
Yes, that's right.
Really? I can't believe it. It feels so frugal.
I sensed a bit of a barb in Sarah's tone and gave her a wry smile. When Mike was little, we were indeed poor. Furthermore, Sarah wanted to see Mike's room and started wandering around the house. She laughed out loud and chuckled when she saw my personal belongings. Was it really that funny?
Yes, all the designs were the kind I'd never buy myself. They were new to me. Like this one, it's amazing.
Laughing, Sarah pointed to a purse that my late husband had given me as a gift. Oh, it's old, yes, but it was a gift from my husband.
But it's tacky. I'll get you a nicer one next time.
It was unclear if Sarah was listening to what I said, but that's what she blurted out. To me, it's a keepsake, and even though it's old, it's well cared for without any damage or dirt. It felt like she was belittling my feelings, and that hurt a little. However, Sarah never spoke down to Mike like that in front of him. I was feeling uneasy, but since Sarah is Mike's wife and not my daughter, I didn't want to make too much of a fuss and decided to let Mike make his own choices, acknowledging their marriage. Afterward, Sarah and Mike had their wedding. During the wedding, there were moments that confirmed our bad compatibility. Sarah, congratulations today. You look beautiful.
Thank you, Ellie. You're your usual self.
Yes. Thank you. When I replied that way, Sarah laughed unpleasantly. I didn't know what she was thinking at the time, but I overheard her talking with a friend after the ceremony.
So, I tried to hint at how tacky Ellie's outfit was by saying your usual self, but she thanked me.
That's hilarious. She really is a playmill, isn't she?
I was so embarrassed my face turned red. Even though it was a rental, I was wearing a proper branded dress. I had intentionally chosen a plain design so as not to outshine the bride, and I hadn't expected my consideration to be mocked. Indeed, I didn't want to have much to do with Sarah and her crowd. Since the wedding, I haven't had much contact with Sarah. Fortunately, there are no signs of children, and all is peaceful. But suddenly, the time came when I had to interact with Sarah again. Out of the blue, Mike suggested that we live together. Sarah was reluctant, but Mike seemed worried about me living alone. I was happy to live with my son. I knew he was concerned about my mobility. In fact, I had recently tripped on the stairs while shopping and twisted my ankle, causing severe pain. I'm still limping, but I can walk. You don't need to worry so much. It'll heal in time.
No, I'm still worried. Sarah, you understand, right?
Yeah.
Mike insisted, and finally, Sarah relented. This is how the not-so-compatible Mill and DIL ended up living together. Mike works long hours, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. During the day, it's just Sarah and me. I was tense and on guard, but Sarah didn't do anything. Rather, she goes out every day dressed flamboyantly with heavy makeup. Could it be that she married my son for his money and is having an affair? I try desperately to dismiss such thoughts, but the doubts persist. It's fortunate that I don't have to see Sarah's face much, but she ignores my mobility issues, and I end up doing all the household chores. There's a lot of laundry, and even when I ask for help, she says she's too busy. Busy, though she doesn't work and is always on her smartphone. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore and confronted Sarah. Are you actually saving any money with all this going out every day?
What's with this sudden question? I'm saving more than you, Ellie, so don't worry. We just don't share the same taste. You're too frugal for me.
Her comment, looking down on me as if I were poor, was infuriating. How disrespectful to say such a thing to someone older. All right, changing the subject, though, I'd like you to help out a bit more with the housework.
I thought it'd be better to let you do things your way.
Despite her pretense of consideration, Sarah said this brazenly. I was about to yell at her to stop lying, but clenched my fist and held back. My leg still hurts, so I could really use some help. Perhaps worried that Mike would hear about it and get upset, Sarah started to help a little with the chores. But this was when her harassment began. She would make dinner, only to put extra spicy seasoning just in my portion, or she'd turn off the water heater while I was bathing. Sarah claimed these were just accidents, but I'm sure they were intentional. And when I thought she was cleaning, she would use my clothes as cleaning rags. She would hang the laundry out again after I brought it in because of rain, getting everything soaking wet. There were countless such annoyances every day, too many to confront her about. Then something unforgivable happened. Sarah had sold my late husband's pocket watch on an online auction. I had noticed her sneaking around. When she went to the restroom, I peeked into her room. There it was, my husband's watch inside a cardboard box. The shipping label was addressed to an online auction site. She was using unfamiliar boxes and packing tape. What was she thinking, selling someone else's belongings? As I stared in disbelief at the cardboard box, Sarah returned.
Ellie, what are you doing?
Sarah, what is this all about?
What do you mean? I was just about to sell this watch.
This was my husband's. Why would you sell it without asking? As I confronted her, Sarah made a face of displeasure.
It was just a mistake. I was cleaning and found a dusty watch, and I thought it was junk.
That's a lie. There's no way. This watch was kept in a display case, which I clean regularly. I lost my temper and shouted, "Don't joke around." Then Sarah, unapologetic and laughing, said,
Oh, scary. Please stop being hysterical.
"What?
You're not struggling financially thanks to your son. Complaining about something like this seems pretty petty, doesn't it?
Gratitude, showing no remorse at all, was too much for me. Don't touch anything in this room. Don't even come in." With that, I left, and the mood between Sarah and me soured even more. Then, Sarah stopped doing anything for me, not dinner or laundry. I thought about discussing it with Mike, but he's serious and comes home tired from work every day. Complaining about his wife and mother quarreling over petty harassment would just upset him. Maybe it's better I just prepare my own meals so I can eat properly. I endured Sarah's harassment and just tried to get through it. But her harassment escalated. She would deliberately place objects in the hallway where I'd walk, knowing my leg was bad. She only did this during the day. Everything was cleared up by the time Mike returned home. Once, I tried to subtly warn her about it. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but my leg is bad, and it's difficult for me when you leave things in the hallway."
If you keep saying that, it will never get better. It's good practice for walking.
Sarah said this with a laugh. Perhaps upset by being called out, the next day there were even more objects blocking the way. It seems she also believes I wouldn't notice, but it appears she's been stealing money from my wallet. Initially, I thought she was just moving my purse around. But the thefts were so frequent that I realized it when I went shopping and found less money in it. I don't know when she started or how much Sarah has taken. It's my own home, and yet I've come to feel I can't let my guard down. Sarah's harassment isn't confined to the house. She's started spreading bad things about me to acquaintances in the neighborhood. She goes around saying completely untrue things, like the disliked Mill is the one harassing. My close friends don't believe it and they tell me about it, but casual acquaintances might. I was at my wit's end, and as Sarah started taking more money from the wallet, I couldn't stand it any longer. I've reached my limit. That night, while Sarah was in the bath, I took the opportunity to speak to Mike. "Mike, I'm sorry, but I have to demand compensation from Sarah."
Compensation? What happened?
"I've been harassed by her. I want her to apologize for everything." Mike was surprised, though he seemed to think it was a joke and chuckled.
Mom, that's not funny. Are you serious?
Indeed, it must have been shocking for Mike. I'm serious. Look at this. I brought out a notebook and opened it in front of Mike. This notebook contains detailed records of the harassment from Sarah, starting with the very first overly spicy meal. I had been keeping records, and before I knew it, they spanned 6 months. I was surprised myself to see how long the harassment had been going on. As I flipped through the notebook, Mike's expression changed.
Is this really?
Mike held his head in his hands. But the entries included detailed dates and times, making it clear that I wasn't just making things up. I want compensation, and if you agree, I think it's best if you divorce Sarah. Just then, Sarah came out of the bath. As she was heading to her room, Mike stopped her.
Sarah, we need to talk.
What's up?
Sarah approached and noticed the notebook on the table. Mike handed her the notebook, and her face turned sour as she read.
Mom says you've been harassing her this much. Is that true?
That's a lie. Don't you trust me?
But
With all these details, you still plan to deny it.
This notebook alone isn't proof.
Sarah said with a smirk. Mike was unsure who to believe. But I had anticipated that Sarah would deny everything. I showed them a camera I had set up in my room. Recently, I had placed it near my purse. The video showed Sarah repeatedly taking money from my wallet. I hadn't told Mike about the stolen money yet, but it seems he believed me because of the camera.
even stealing money. Sarah, why would you do something like this?
It's not a big deal. I just found you annoying.
Annoying? What did Mom even do to you?
You're just too poor for my taste. I'm sorry, but taking care of a mill like you is the last thing I want.
Sarah finally showed her true colors even in front of Mike. Mike was left speechless and shaking with shock. Anyway, this is theft. It's a crime. If you can't apologize properly, I'll have to report this to the police. Laughing as if it was funny, Sarah chuckled.
Going to the police over a few $1,000s? You really are a poor person, so petty.
Mike was furious at her response.
Enough is enough.
Perhaps it was the first time Mike had yelled at her, as Sarah visibly flinched.
Sarah, just because we're from a single mother household, you've been looking down on me all this time.
No, I wasn't looking down on you, Mike.
Mike shook his head at Sarah's words and began to reveal a truth unknown to her. Actually, I used to run a company. It was the precursor to the trading company Mike works for. When my husband was hospitalized, I sold the company to another trading firm to pay for his treatment. It was tough to take care of him and raise a child at the same time back then. And after my husband's death, I inherited several properties from him and still earn passive income from them. Sarah looked shocked, probably thinking I was just a pension-receiving old lady living alone, a burden to Mike. Mike continued. All of Mike's tuition and our wedding expenses were properly covered by me. The wedding, which became expensive due to Sarah's demands, happened thanks to me. I provided 3 times the amount Mike had saved. Using a scholarship was just Mike's way of being considerate, and this house was never impoverished. Now, although Mike's salary exceeds my income, I still hold assets that are comparable to those of an average salaried worker.
What? I didn't know that.
Even if you didn't know, what you did was despicable.
Cutting off Sarah's excuses, Mike turned back to me.
Mom, I'm sorry I didn't notice what you were going through. I was foolish to make you endure this.
It's okay, Mike. It's not your fault. Don't apologize. Mike then presented Sarah with two choices. One was to use the surveillance footage as evidence and report her to the police. The other was to acknowledge the harassment she did to me and retract the lies she spread around the neighborhood.
Which will it be? Decide now.
Of course, Sarah chose the latter.
I apologize. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Just please, no police.
She probably didn't realize the severity of her actions until now. Her face pale, she cried and apologized to me.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
I can't just forgive you right away. Show me through your actions. I sternly told her, and Sarah hung her head. Since then, she's been correcting her lies to our neighbors, trying to improve my image. Honestly, even if Sarah apologizes meekly, it won't immediately fix my impression. Maybe they'll think she's being forced to lie by a wicked wife. Even so, if Sarah is truly remorseful, this is the best way. While I felt somewhat vindicated, Mike apparently isn't ready to let this go. After Sarah returned the stolen money, Mike told her they were getting a divorce. He presented her with already filled out divorce papers.
Please leave this house immediately.
But I apologized.
You just apologized for your own sins. I can't trust a wife who commits such crimes.
It was later discovered that my leg injury was actually caused by Sarah. On my way back from shopping, as I was descending the stairs, I was bumped into and fell. Unexpectedly, it was Sarah who bumped into me. Sarah injured my leg to make Mike worry. Her ultimate aim was to get this house. Though slightly old, this house is in a very good location. It's spacious, and with some renovations, it could become a beautiful detached home. Realizing that Sarah had planned this from the start, Mike and I were shaken. Thus, we returned to living just the two of us. My leg has mostly healed, and I no longer have trouble walking. A year later, surprisingly, I found Sarah living homeless in the local park. Ever since she was married to Mike, she had squandered her savings on endless entertainment, relying on Mike's wealth. Furthermore, she had borrowed money from friends and acquaintances. It seems she was repaying these debts with the money from my wallet. Unable to continue repaying her debts, Sarah became isolated, with no one to help her. After the divorce, penniless, Sarah struggled to make ends meet by juggling several part-time jobs. However, her relationships at work did not go well, and she kept changing jobs. Because of this, she struggled to pay her apartment rent and was eventually evicted due to arrears. Her reputation has spread around the neighborhood, and now no store will hire her. Despite it being her own doing, it seems she has received quite a harsh punishment. Meanwhile, Mike divorced Sarah and remarried 6 months later. I was worried that after everything with Sarah, Mike might never marry again. As a parent, naturally, I was concerned about who would take care of him after I'm gone. I hoped that Mike would find someone to look after him as he grows older. Fortunately, those worries turned out to be unnecessary. The woman he remarried was someone he met through work, very reliable. Just to be safe, I had told her about Sarah, but she said it was all in the past and not to worry. His new wife is very thoughtful. She takes care of me without a single complaint. She also has a caregiving qualification from her background in welfare, and she is now planning renovations for us. Finally, I feel fully accepted as family by my DIL, and I am filled with happiness. She invites me on trips just as easily as if I were her real daughter. However, we go out together so often that I sometimes think I should give Mike and her some space. Even more joyously, his new wife is now pregnant. They went to the hospital and immediately shared the news with me upon their return. Mike looked very happy. Living together day by day with my first grandchild and a family of 4. I find myself dreaming of such a joyful future.